What happens if you don't overcome the crisis but simply state, "Let it happen, and then we will see"? Most likely, you will simply break up sooner or later. Your relationship will improve more and more, even if this breakup does not happen immediately, resultant of another and another crisis unresolved. It will get worse and worse between you. More and more emotionally and logically, you will distance yourselves from each other, until at some point there will be a breakup, usually with some kind of argument that will tip the scales, and finally the breakup will happen. If this doesn't happen, you will remain in the phase of an empty relationship. You will be exposed to the fact that someone new will suddenly appear in your life, and you or your partner will simply become interested in a new person, and this will ultimately bring a finality and end the relationship. That's why it's never a good idea to downplay a crisis when you feel that something is wrong in your relationship. Instead of playing around with quiet days, which is never a good option, you need to do something about it. Because unfortunately, nothing ever fixes itself. At most, it can only break down by itself. Waiting is generally a very bad idea, and you need to implement the right strategy to improve this quality of the relationship as quickly and as strongly as possible. One of the most important steps before you take any action is to diagnose the situation you are currently in. One of the first elements of such a diagnosis is to consider whether there is an imbalance of commitment between you and your partner in your relationship. If there is an imbalance, to whose disadvantage? Is it you who is trying harder for your partner? Or is it the other way around and it is your partner who strives more for you? It will be very easy to diagnose this if you ask yourself just a few such key questions. One such question, first of all, is to think about how it is in terms of physicality between you. Who of you is more likely to pursue cuddling, some kind gestures, stroking, kissing, even sex? Who definitely initiates it less? Is there any great disproportion here, or is there an equal amount of this involvement? Another element is the suggestion of spending time together. What does this look like? When you have the opportunity to spend some of this free time, do you see each other? If you don't live together yet, who suggests meetings more often? Who pays more attention to the other party? Is one party more likely to zone in on his phone, text someone, take care of other business? Or is it more or less equal? Both of you don't care too much about what's going on anymore, each goes back to his own business and it's hard to tell clearly? Or are you the one who is always open and ready to talk, and only when your partner has left the computer, then you always talk? It is worth considering this element as well. Who is more available in terms of time? Who wants to spend this time more often? This is how you can tell if there is a broken balance of commitment or not. Also, in terms of how often you say nice things to each other. Who says "I love you" more often? Who says some compliments more often? Words of appreciation. Some nice things. Not necessarily confessions of affection, but showing that we just care more. Who goes back to the past more often, when things were good between you? Who is more likely to plan for the future between the two of you, whether it's some kind of trip or talking about some kind of move, kids, building a house or some kind of loan? If clearly there are such plans on one side and the other doesn't mention anything about it, that too could be a sign that there is a broken balance of feelings between you. One side is sure and wants to build a future, and the other is uncertain, is a little withdrawn, just a little less the other side cares about the relationship. It's also worth noting who shows a lack of interest more often. Does he or she not answer the phone, doesn't write back, doesn't want to meet, cancels meetings, is the first to end conversations, whether on the phone or through some instant messaging? Who is the first to end meetings, or the first to say, "Okay, we're going to bed now"? The first to end conversations, even such daily conversations, and get on with some of his own stuff. This is also important to pay attention to. If you are always eager to be there, to talk, to drag out these conversations, to drag out this meeting, this too can work against you in practice. If it's an imperceptible difference, then there's nothing to worry about, especially if things are good between you. While if the disparity is very large, then it will definitely be very important. It is very important, first of all, how this balance has been shaped over recent events, that is, for example, the last month, and not how it was a year ago, because it could look completely different. What matters above all is the here and now. The last month is particularly important. More or less on this basis, try to assess what situation you are in now. Because sometimes it may be that earlier it was you who didn't try at all, but over the last month you've been trying too hard, breaking this balance to your disadvantage, jumping from extreme to extreme. Still, this balance is broken to your disadvantage, and you will still have to eliminate those mistakes that break this balance all the time. You should focus on implementing positive behaviors that will improve this balance no matter what the past was like. Of course, just diagnosing the stage you are at in terms of commitment balance is not enough. Very important is what your partner is telling you. Is something bothering him or her about you? Is it about some recurring conflict, for example, conflict about how you raise your children, conflict about what it looks like to keep your house in order, what it looks like to spend money or sex? Very often there is hostility in a relationship that builds up over time, precisely because you have unresolved conflicts in your relationship. So listen to what your partner is telling you, what he wants from you, what changes he may be demanding. Perhaps he wants you to quit some addiction, take better care of yourself, lose weight even. Or are there some other things that clearly did not suddenly appear, but somewhere in there once in a while you were getting such messages more or less subtle? Sometimes it might occur that when your partner wants to break up or has even already broken up, they will create false scenarios for argument's sake. It's very easy to diagnose this, first of all, by thinking about whether this argument used to actually appear and whether it was any kind of obstacle before. Because if the argument in question appears precisely in such a total crisis situation, when there is already talk of a breakup, and something like this has never occurred to you before, or the argument in question is basically ridiculous of the type, you are not spontaneous enough, you plan too much, you sit at home too much, then it is not something worth changing. This is a certain trait of your personality, and these are already more indicative of how your partner rationalizes his desire to break up. This is not something he would actually want you to change. The moment you fix this balance of commitment, show that you are the one who can leave at any time, then such contrived arguments that suddenly appeared, which never happened before, will not matter. On the other hand, if the argument isn't contrived, but your partner is really bothered by something, whether it's some character trait of yours, like impulsiveness or some addiction of yours, or something you regularly do that bothers your partner, or that you don't do, which is the cause of your conflict, then that's something you'll really need to focus hard on, because it's such a logical area to control. When it comes to recovering from such a crisis, sometimes you will simply have to show that you have finally understood your mistakes after so many months and sometimes even years of asking your partner that there is indeed something to it. It is then also worthwhile in such a situation to apologize that you did not see it before, and while keeping an eye on not further breaking the balance of commitment between you to disarm these logical obstacles. A big mistake is to show that you will do anything just to make sure your partner doesn't break up with you, because this will break the balance of commitment between you. Because even if you overcome the logical obstacles, emotionally you will push your partner away even more, which can make things even worse in your relationship. On the other hand, if you do it in such a wise and thoughtful way, that is, you show that you really understood the mistake, and whether you will be together or not, you really want to work on it, because you see that this is something that your current partner, or perhaps sometime in the future, a new partner, will also be bothered by. So, you're going to do it anyway, first and foremost for yourself, and not to save the relationship at all costs. If you communicate this with such an approach, rather than checking and asking your partner if you're already doing the right thing and if he's already satisfied, just approach the solution to such a problem with a little more confidence and with more independence. It will definitely have more power. The most important thing is also to talk about these changes of yours, no matter what kind it is to change, not to do it for show. Do not parade in front of your partner, but communicate such changes very subtly. Let your partner see that on your desk there is some book you are reading, or you have left a page open with some article, for example, How to Get Out of Alcoholism. Let him see for himself that you are reading on the subject, that something is going on, that you are having some kind of consultation with some specialist who is helping you solve some problem. If it's a mess, just demonstrate that you've obviously started taking better care of yourself and just go to great lengths to do so. By demonstrating, rather than talking about it, you will definitely be able to resolve the problem in a more attractive manner in your partner's view. To begin with, the most important thing is to diagnose such issues. What could be wrong? What conflict is there to resolve that keeps coming back? What potential logical problem will be worth resolving? What is not necessarily worth resolving because it is completely contrived? As for recurring conflicts, this is a relatively difficult skill because these conflicts are many. They can be resolved if you learn all those methods that are now known to humanity, which help resolve disputes even on an international scale. So in conclusion, sit back now and think about these two elements. The first, what does the balance of commitment look like for you? The second, are there any things that are really bothering my partner that I could change? If it turns out that you've broken the balance of commitment to your detriment, that you've been trying a lot harder for your partner, or even just a little bit harder, but you just see that there's a disproportion here in terms of who gives how much of themselves, then regardless of other obstacles, this balance will have to be fixed, and this will be one of the most important things you need to focus on to get out of the crisis. Therefore, I will now give you a whole list of things that are worth doing and things that are worth not doing. However, I will warn you right at the beginning that some of these things will be a little controversial. This may only be the case at first, because once you catch the totality of what is worth doing in such situations, it will give you a much better understanding of the subject. So, open your mind. Even if something may seem a little controversial to you, it only appeared in this course because they bring results. Interestingly, it's usually the most controversial strategies that yield the best results. Sometimes the entire dynamics of a relationship can turn around in a single day. These are rare cases, but they still happen. That is what this video will be about. Let's start with what internal attitude is worth adopting towards this problem you are facing. Your partner is trying less than you, and you are trying a little more. It's a bit as if he loves you less, or even at times you may feel that he doesn't love you at all after certain behaviors. Of course, this is not true. Since he is with you all the time, the feeling is there somewhere. True, it may be a bit dimmed and not as intense as it used to be, but the feeling of love is not an on-off switch. Love fluctuates like charts on the stock market, once more and once less. It changes over time. It's gradual and not on a 0-1 basis, either love or no love, so it's worth understanding. It can also change completely depending on what your behavior is like, and just because your partner told you 2 months ago that he loved you doesn't mean he loves you today. But also, just because he tells you today that he doesn't love you, doesn't mean that those feelings of his won't increase in another month or two, the moment you start implementing all those attractive behaviors I'm about to tell you about. On the other hand, it is very important to understand that your partner has no obligation to love you, because it is not up to him. You also can't say, I'm going to fall in love with someone, or I'm going to fall out of love with my partner, because he doesn't deserve it. We have virtually no power over that. On the other hand, whether you love your partner depends primarily on him. It depends on how he behaves, what he does, how attractive he is to you, and you don't have much of a say here. The same is true in the other direction. Whether your partner loves you, how much he loves you, depends primarily on how you behave. How attractive are you to him? How are you able to resolve disputes? Are you empathetic? Are you trustworthy? What are your attractiveness factors after a relationship of some years? Do you care about the balance of commitment between you? Thinking about your partner, you can't hold it against him that he isn't trying as hard as you would like at any given time. This is not his responsibility. You can't put such an obligation on him that he has to love you when you have no power over it. It's worth starting by forgiving him for the fact that he's not currently as interested in you as you'd like, and consequently, it's also worth forgiving him for not always wanting to spend as much time with you as you'd like, not always wanting to have sex with you as often as you'd like, not wanting to hug as often, not wanting to talk as often, so instead of getting upset with him, just accept it. Treat it as a symptom, as a kind of signpost that shows you where you are, how close you still are to actually getting those feelings back on track. Don't get frustrated at the fact that you're not there yet, that this interest isn't too high yet, because this person just can't do anything about it. When this is how you look at your partner, it will be much easier for you to avoid all the mistakes that break that balance of commitment further to your disadvantage. What are these mistakes? First of all, demands on your partner along the lines of, you don't love me anymore because you don't want sex. You don't want to spend time with me because you'd rather hang out with your friends instead of me. You'd rather sit on your phone instead of talking to me, and so on. So, if your partner doesn't show you as much interest as you want, and you resent him for it, see what happens. He shows you a lack of interest, and you show him interest. You show how much you would like his attention, his closeness. This is completely normal. This is such a very human and natural mistake. On the other hand, if you don't stop this behavior and always show your interest when your partner shows a lack of interest, this balance will become more and more broken, and your partner will become more and more estranged. Unfortunately, in the long run, your relationship will fall apart for this very reason. This is the kind of self-perpetuating vicious cycle that will simply destroy your relationship. Focus on never showing interest when your partner is not interested. This is such a guiding principle that is always worth applying. When you see a lack of interest on your partner's part, it's your job to show your lack of interest too, but in the smallest and calmest way possible, so that you don't show that it upsets you in any way. I will show this with an example. If you propose that you go out to dinner somewhere together in the evening, and your partner says, "No, because I have a very important TV series to watch," and does not propose to you in any other way to spend your time but tells you subtly, "I want to be alone," this can be taken as a kind of lack of interest. In this case, you also need to react as if you are not interested. How to do this? First of all, think about how you would behave in such a situation. Imagine that you propose something like going out together to some friend of yours who is totally uninterested in you. You stated that you have a free evening. Maybe I'll do something, although I don't know if I want to, but nevertheless I will propose this outing. Well, and suddenly it turns out that this person can't or won't. Well, and then what? After all, you will not be angry with this person. You may even feel relieved. It's probably even better, because I didn't really want to, and I'll sit at home. Think about what your reaction will be if you actually want it on average. Do you have any resentment towards such a person? Of course not. You are more likely to say, "Cool, another time." And that's it. That's where it will most likely end. You will not be offended in any way. You may still exchange some 2 sentences to show that you are in a good mood all the time and absolutely nothing has happened. So that's the best reaction. Similarly, in other situations, for example, when you are talking on the phone and your partner ends the conversation very quickly, then don't ask, "Why doesn't he have time to talk to you?" In such a situation on his lack of interest, you show your interest. It is better to say something casually and calmly. "Okay, then hang in there. Bye." And that's it, so that it is not in any way apparent that you are offended. This answer must not be so unkind, like, "Okay, then bye, go away." It's supposed to be just the opposite, showing that there's not the slightest problem, everything is still fine, and then at least you're not further breaking the balance of commitment between you here. If you keep making this mistake, it will only get worse and worse. If your partner hasn't written you back, then don't ask him why he hasn't written you back. You don't need this information for anything. What should he come up with for you? Well, he just didn't want to. He wasn't interested enough to sit with his nose in the phone and wait for you to write to him, just to write you back immediately. He is withdrawn, you have to accept this, face this fact, and that's it. Don't comment on it in any way. Don't ask yourself why he hasn't written you back. Just accept it. If your relationship was 100% healthy, everything was okay, and suddenly something like this happened, you could definitely afford to do more. For example, in a situation where you have an appointment with your partner and he cancels without giving you any major reason, then in a normal healthy relationship, when there is no crisis, as much as possible you can ask, "Honey, what are you doing here? Why are you canceling like this at the last minute?" Well, you must be kidding me. On the other hand, if there is a broken balance of feelings between the two of you, clearly you are the one who has tried much harder up to this point, and you are focused on fixing this balance, then you need to be much more careful and play it much safer. In such a situation, you sometimes even have to forcefully show your lack of interest with words. "Oh, that's even better, because I didn't want to do it for a bit too." Or, "Cool, nothing to worry about, even better, because I have a headache." Or, "Then I'll go meet a friend, because I haven't seen him in a long time." The main thing is not to try to arouse jealousy in such situations. If you're a guy, then meet with a male friend. If you're a woman, then with a female friend. It's really very important not to try to somehow educate our partner here. How dare he do such things? When the situation is already relatively bad, there is some kind of crisis, and you need to focus hard on fixing this balance of feelings. This is when you need to be unproblematic, accept everything, show that you are totally indifferent, nothing impresses you, and that all in all it's even better. It is also a very big mistake to take offense at your partner about anything. Of course, the worst is when he has shown you a lack of interest and then you get offended at him. This is just that classic example of showing the contrast, i.e. his lack of interest versus your interest, and still in this negative way. That is to say, you are just firing back that he didn't call you, didn't write to you, that doesn't make an effort. In this way, you push him away from you even more, which is very ineffective and kills your attractiveness, because you are showing your interest there. You can see that you don't like it very much. If you didn't care, you wouldn't behave this way. On the other hand, since you care, you are just offended. And this is the worst way to react to your partner's lack of interest. So really avoid being offended very strongly. Don't show a frown. Don't show that you're suddenly walking around sad, or some sort of mentally battered by the fact that your partner isn't showing you as much interest as you'd like, that you're suddenly sort of moody, you're not speaking to him. Even if you really feel sorry and sad, try to keep up some game of appearances that it's not because of your partner. I know this is where it gets controversial again, because we should be honest with our partner. And this is true. In a situation where things are pretty good in the relationship, we should be honest with each other. But if there's a crisis, if your partner has been estranged from you for a long time, he's tired of talking about it, that he doesn't care, that he's not trying for you and he just wants to have peace and quiet, and you're still going to talk about how you feel hurt and how you're terribly sorry, then in such a situation it's going to work even more against you. So, it is definitely better to grit your teeth and say nothing. Pretend that absolutely nothing is happening. When your partner sees that you're in some bad mood, you can blame it on something else. I have a terribly hard project at work, I don't know if I'll make it. Or, my friend got offended at me and now I'm wondering what to do. Sorry, don't take it personally. You have to do everything you can to make sure your partner doesn't feel like you're offended at him, because that will kill your balance of feelings. I know this can be controversial, but this is where people make the most common mistakes in repairing relationships, because sometimes everything is going in the right direction, and suddenly there are such mistakes that someone is offended during the whole process. If someone resents the lack of interest in the process of overcoming the crisis, then again you have to take 2 steps back. Sometimes it is even back to square one if these mistakes are drastic, but most often after such an insult there is, "Oh no, here we go again, you go back to the old behavior. I can't do that, I don't like it." So the partner moves away again, and that's what you have to avoid. I invite you to the next section. If you liked the material, leave a like and send it to a friend or someone close to you who may benefit from this knowledge. If you want to support our work and help us create more valuable videos, there is a link in the description.